texts with a certain degree of analytic acumen that's politically driven to identify signs of colonial hegemony, as it were, to read with a certain kind of critical desire to intervene with that discourse. And that's, I think, where you get a new kind of criticism emerging. At the same time, when you talk about the trope of post-colonialism, you're talking very much as though it's a present moment, but quite a lot of post-colonial criticism and theory is concerned with reinterpreting the past. And yes, one might become patronising towards the other as they are enlisted into narratives of that past, but there is also a desire to recover a stronger voice or position or space which might or might not be appropriate. And certainly in my own work on Maori writing in English in New Zealand, I do see that over the last 3 decades there is a much more strongly empowered way of addressing the past in Maori writing, which is to do with being confrontational towards his past decisions, past sort of the victimization as it was perceived. So post-colonial scholars are not just white people trying to bring the colonized out of the woodwork. It's also those themselves who are trying to create their own voices and sense of agency. My other point was in relation to your third point about the literatures of the indigenous languages, and you ask whether the kind of knowledge that one acquires is what one might call a literary knowledge. And again, I don't know about indigenous writings in India because I obviously don't have the language, but my understanding of a literature is that often we're brought into the realm of the imagination. We're brought into the realm of metaphor and possibility and doubt, and therefore knowledge itself is under stress in a literary text. We're being challenged about the extent and boundaries of our own knowledge systems. And so as a reader of literature, one is being constantly asked to rethink what the knowledge base is or what the understanding of reality is.
Yes. In fact, Dr. Janet Wilson has, I believe, worked on white
settler, yes.
Settlers.
Yes, yes.
So many of them came to India also.
Yes.
So I always wondered, Janet, who stays in the capital and who comes to the colony? Because to come to the colony is a dangerous thing.
Yes, it is.
And they die young, they died young, and then the benefits went to one who stayed. So in fact, the word capitalism has 2 meanings. One is economic capitalism, but this other is staying at the, and that reminds me of my friend and colleague, Professor Sheldon Pollock, who collaborated with, in fact, Homi Baba collaborated with Sheldon Pollock because Pollock knows Sanskrit and many Indian languages. I think Baba is mainly a scholar of English.
That's right.
Yes. So there is no guarantee that if you're an Indian, you know Indian languages. It could be the other way around also. It depends on the interest, or the kind of mind that you have.
Yes.
Pollock used to distinguish between 2 kind of cosmopolitanism, and that's what you ask. Sanskrit and Latin, and Gujarati and Italian. Pollock brings out a distinction. I said the cosmopolitan language in Europe would very often rule out the local languages, while wherever Sanskrit went, it encouraged the local languages. And it distinguishes between two types of colonialism, two types of cosmopolitanism, and the camouflage idea that Professor Avdesh Kumar brings to the table here. One kind of cosmopolitanism is nothing but another name of colonialism, because a colonial culture, the hegemonic colonizer,
brings its metropolitan preferences with it.
But there is another kind of meeting place, the true cosmopolitan meeting place, where multiple languages are heard. But some language provides a link between these multiple languages. Because how can a human being know so many languages? So the true cosmopolitan language, Urdu in fact was known as the language of the marketplace, because the learned and not so learned met there, so a new kind of language of exchange was produced. Sanskrit was like that. So cosmopolitanism in a sham way would be this kind of cosmopolitanism which would permit the local varieties. But the other one could promote local varieties. I think we are looking for such a cosmopolis.
I mean, you talk about the need for a language to link together people that have disparate languages, and I must say that you do call them languages, and of course in my study of language I've looked at pidgins and creoles, which is the other type of contact language, and they aren't real languages as such. They do have a very pragmatic function, which is simply to allow trade to occur. But it is in situations of probably quite diminished contact. So there is a real difference between the types of language that link together people that are speaking in full contact with each other, but don't have the linguistic resources, and those who are real strangers to each other on these boundary areas of trading on coastlines and through shipping and merchant trading.
Our only hope is that as post-colonial studies develop under the guidance of both of you, there will be space for what is called vernacular languages, but they are as old as English and French in their production of knowledge and in production of literature. And there would be more space for Gujarati and Marathi and
I think that's
rather than national languages also. So I think we have interrogated internally, four of us, quite a bit. I think now we are ready for a larger interrogation from our friends.
So shall we invite questions?
From the floor.
So we keep open this session for the discussion, and we invite questions from you, sir.
First of all, it was very illuminating to listen to all these distinguished panelists here. As a student who's trying to hold on and grasp these things a little bit, one starts wondering that as long as there is just a third space, there's no problem perhaps, or as long as there are three cultures, the dominant culture, the residual culture, or the emergent culture, there is probably no problem. Once upon a time it was culture with a capital C, and now there's these. But the reality today, although we are just in the first decade of the 21st century, is that on one hand we have erasure of boundaries, and on the other we seem to be again erecting cliques within cliques, whether they are multinational companies aligning together themselves, or powerful nations of G7 or G8 again aligning themselves. So one gets then a little confused at these two contrapunctal forces operating at the same time. Also then, but there is probably at the level of creativity, there might be, and I don't know, I'm just putting it, thinking aloud, that suddenly there's a resurgence back to all over the world, the fantasy once again. whether it is, you know, the fantasy literature and as well as the films of on fantasy is coming back. So is the new generation coming to some kind of a commonality across borders? So is creativity or creative practice building links where critiques and critical discourses are at places, puncturing them, and is that what is happening? So I'm along with Professor Singh raising certain questions that I'm trying to understand myself. Thank you very much.
I think this is very much your question, Odisha, if you would like to.
Sir, question is yours, but I would receive it first. I'll combine couple of observations with this. Dr. Janet Wilson will forgive me if I make the statement that she said that Homi Bhabha and Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak, they are Indian critics. Since they are Indian, that does not mean that Indians should not question them.
Oh, absolutely.
On their categories. And I think we are happy with the celebrity status that they have. We relish their reputation or whatever accolades that they have earned for themselves, but the other fact remains that they tend to either distort or misrepresent the reality that they do not comprehend fully.
I'm aware.
Be it Spivak, she is perhaps better because she has read some Bengali literature. Homi Bhabha has not read any of Indian literature so well, even say for instance Urdu or Persian literature. To the best of my knowledge, I doubt this. Sir rightly mentioned perhaps Sheldon Pollock is in a better position because he has tried to follow Sanskrit for decades and decades altogether. Therefore, at least I am not competent at the moment to speak even about a single Indian language, and leave aside the question of speaking about post-colonial India as such. Regarding the question of the location of those who speak about India or post-colonial Indian critics or post-colonial criticism as such, I would say that the post-colonial critics, in terms of locations and in terms of co-options that they enjoy, the fact is that some of them have certain landscape, mindscape, but most of us in Indian languages, we have all of them, but all those landscapes and mindscape, they stand on what we call as ruinscape. So for me, my ruinscape is more important than my landscape or my location. Therefore, I don't think anybody can comprehend any reality fully, but the people who have understood more, their versions are more reliable than the versions of those who have come to know this reality only in a fleeting manner. Regarding sir, the observation pertaining to interdisciplinarity and the question Dr. Mukherjee raised, observation that he made, we can't escape interdisciplinarity, and this is the best way to reach to some kind of healthy conclusion about whatever human situation we want to comprehend or understand. Indian creativity as it is manifested in Indian languages, again very difficult to generalize about it. To what extent fantasy is coming back to creativity? Yes, Harry Potter, to this, like the new films on Jai Hanuman and all these films. Yes, the best minds are making films now, or they are associated with film world. Only a few minds like Professor Shitanshu, they have still resisted the temptation of not enjoying the medium of the age.
Although
they've written screen.
Sir has done that. So they are doing it, and I think the Indian film in Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, they are of course taking recourse to it, but I think to subvert reality, and maybe to some extent, at least for a point of time, for some time, it gives a kind of relief. That is it. Otherwise, I can't speak really about Indian creativity in Indian languages as such. I think sir and ma'am, they will have the.
We may also, as you said, the remaining decades of the 21st century are sitting there. So maybe some more questions, and then we could request.
We have only a few minutes left.
Please.
You can expand it.
Some more questions? Okay.
Could I just say a couple of words here that I've only heard Homi Baba and Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak speak once, and that was at Hyderabad. And he gave a paper that he said had been written in the archives. So he was clearly going back to Indian texts, and she had just been with subalterns in Bengali and was talking about them. So in their own homeland, they were very respectful of the traditions that they seem to have perhaps taken less notice of in America. In terms of the fantasy question, as I come from the country where Lord of the Rings was made, and I've seen how the country has profited economically from that single film, can I just say that fantasy seems to speak globally in ways that other genres do not at present, and that is something that perhaps goes with a global culture, because we don't need a cultural specificity. We can move into another realm, and yet we can all share in it. It's just a thought.
There's also the notion of cultural specificity and film, and the role that it continues to play. And in the UK, and particularly at the University of Northampton, we